The United States of America, home of the free, land of the brave, land of the brave, home of the free. That's one of the things we've always said. We're the shining light on a hill. We care about other people. We're willing to spend our own blood and treasure to help others around the world. The Statue of Liberty, give us your tired, huddled masses. All of these things, the indispensable nation. We've heard all these things for most of our lives, and most Americans, understandably and reasonably, consider ourselves to be very proud to be Americans, because we do like to help other people, and we do like to be free and fair. We have a democracy. We have freedom of speech. We have the right to bear arms. The Bill of Rights itself, which is one of the biggest things that has always been a benefit of our country, that we show to other people around the world. This is an example of what a good country should be, that takes care of its people, where the government can't compel people to do one thing, and the people recognize that the government's right to exist, and the consent of the governed that has to be given even by the people. So there's always that going on. And now then, we're in some murky territory. We have been for quite a while, where our government has, all of a sudden not been so deferential to our people. Now, there seems to be this kind of growing distance between the elite of the country and the regular people. There's also a lot of discord between the regular people. There's lots of anger and animosity between, of course, the political parties here at home, and lots of other things that have been going on for years, and especially kind of poignant heading into the 2016 election and every day since that time. But there's also issues about how we do things overseas that have a lot of impact on things that happen in the United States. I've long been an advocate that foreign policy is not just something that you hear about once every 4 years when somebody's running for president and they start talking about what their foreign policy is going to be like in one debate, and then we kind of move on from that. A lot of people kind of roll their eyes on that if they don't happen to have an interest in foreign policy. But as I argue, our foreign policy and the things that we do abroad have a lot of impact on our economy, on our national security, and on our safety. And I'm starting to see more and more troubling signs of that, as just frankly, a lot of people, especially a lot of the elites, are getting a lot more careless with their words, and a lot more careless with the facts. And especially when they get on whether social media or mainstream media, it's having, I think, something like a pernicious or even a poisoning effect on our country that we need to identify. That's one of the reasons that we have this channel, because we're going to talk to you about things that the mainstream media doesn't cover, because we're unintimidated. I don't really care if it makes people uncomfortable and hurts some people's feelings. It's the truth. And if we don't talk about it, if we don't get it out in the open, then it's going to continue to fester, and it's continue to harm us. And there's a few examples of recent that just happened in this particular week. And I felt compelled to highlight them here at the end of the week. And we're going to keep an eye on these things, but I want to make you aware of some things that are going on, and tie some things together that you might not have been aware of that were even linked. But once you do, it could possibly moderate how we behave going forward. The first thing I want to look at is something happened on April the 15th by U.S. Senator Tom Cotton. He went on Fox News to talk about a protest that had been going on the Golden Gate Bridge. And it revolves around Palestinian people had brought the traffic to a standstill because they're saying, they want an immediate ceasefire. They want more aid to go into Gaza to help the Palestinian people. And of course, anytime you talk about the Golden Gate Bridge being brought to a standstill, it's going to be pretty inconvenient for a lot of the people on it. And if that doesn't happen to be your issue, you're going to be kind of angry about it. So they asked Senator Cotton, who's from Arkansas, so I'm not really sure why he was the one that was asked. They wanted to know what he thought about it. And he went on and said this.
Feel very deeply for all those people who are trying to get to work or trying to pick up a kid. Very worried about the diversion of police resources when it needs to be stopping crime in cities like San Francisco, where firefighters are having to go there when they might have calls for fires out. I have to say, Sandra, I agree with you that you have to get to these criminals early. If something like this happened in Arkansas on a bridge there, let's just say I think there'd be a lot of very wet criminals that have been tossed overboard, not by law enforcement, but by the people whose road they're blocking. If they glued their hands to a car or the pavement, well, probably pretty painful to have their skin ripped off. But I think that's the way we'd handle it in Arkansas. And I would encourage most people anywhere that get stuck behind criminals like this, who are trying to block traffic, to take matters in their own hands. There's only usually a few of them, and there's a lot of people being inconvenienced. It's time to put an end to this nonsense.
He advocated individuals taking this into their own hands and literally talking about mob violence. And he's actually advocating that they would do that. And of course, at the heart of that, you see in his tweet right here, I encourage people who get stuck behind pro-Hamas mobs. And that's the first thing, is he's badly, intentionally mischaracterizing what those people were doing. Those were Americans. Those were American citizens for the most part. And the issue at stake here is freedom of speech. Do you have the right to protest for something that you find, that's really important to you? The Bill of Rights says yes. The U.S. Constitution says yes. The American way of life says yes. And by definition, I mean, it literally provides the freedom to assemble. And it should be it has been a marker of faith that the United States allows people to share their opinions. And that by definition means that some people won't agree to it, that we have to give the freedom of speech and the freedom to protest when people have views contrary to our own. And for the member of the United States Senate, so a senior member of our government, saying that, number one, they're mischaracterizing. It's not pro-Hamas. That one wasn't. That one was pro-Palestinian people, because they see what's going on in the Gaza Strip with the Israel-Hamas war, and they find it abhorrent. They see so many thousands of innocent women and children and men and old people being killed in the pursuit of Israel going after the Hamas people who did commit a horrible, heinous terrorist attack against Israel on the 10th of October of last year, or the 7th of October, and they, by all rights, can go and defend themselves. No one is questioning that. Even these people aren't questioning that Israel has the right to go after Hamas, who murdered Israeli citizens. And I want to be clear on that point. There is no caveats on that at all. No asterisk. They deserve to go after it. But it is crucial. It is vital how they do it. What they are not authorized to do in self-defense is kill tens of thousands of other people who had nothing to do with it, who just want to live and have a life. And it's not even just the number that have been killed, but it's the fact that they're preventing aid to go through in sufficient quantities. People are literally starving to death. Children are literally dying of malnutrition and dehydration. It's a fact. It's going on there, and it's preventable. People like this on the Golden Gate Bridge see that, and many others around the country. And so they're protesting to try to get the Biden administration to change their policy, to put pressure on Israel to make sure enough aid gets through on a consistent basis. There is nothing irrational or immoral about that. And for the senator to say, hey, it's pro-Hamas. So he's trying to tie it to the terrorist who on the 7th of October committed this terrorist activity. And he's trying to make it sound like all of these people are for the terrorists, ergo they don't deserve, to be able to protest. And that's just a lie. And I think it's one he knows. He's intentionally manipulating his words to cast dispersions on somebody he doesn't like for the benefit of those he does like. And that's not American. Listen, you see, I wore the uniform on active duty for more than 20 years of my life. I went to 4 combat deployments. I love this country. I have been willing to sacrifice my life in her defense, and especially for the soldiers on my left and right when I've been into combat. I would do it again without hesitation if the need be, even in my advanced age here. If the circumstances arose, I'd be willing to do it again because I love this country. But right now, I'm serving my country in the way that I can with this channel and with the voice that I have on, whether it's Fox or News Nation or many of these other networks that I've been going on, because I want the truth to be out there. And I have a problem when I see people saying things against one group, mischaracterizing what they're saying, denying them freedom of speech and denying them a voice because you don't like what they're doing. That's not what America is supposed to be about. If you think they're wrong, you have the right to give your voice, to say, no, I think they're wrong because of X, Y, and Z. And I will defend your right to do it. I am defending their right to say it, but I defend everybody's right. As long as you don't violate American law, and there is a limit there, it's not unambiguous free speech. You can't just say whatever you want, like the guys in Michigan. I believe I think it was Ann Arbor a week or so ago that were saying "Death to America" and chanting those kinds of things. That crosses the line because that's advocating violence for our country, and you don't have the freedom to do that. So I stand opposed to that. But if you're just sharing your view, you do have the right to do that. I fought for that right. I served this country because I believe in this country. And I know that if you start choosing who you're going to suppress, and if the government decides this voice is not authorized, and so we're going to suppress it, folks, right now, it's the people who are protesting for Palestine. But what if tomorrow it's something different, something that you care a lot about? And I assure you, those things will change as different people get in power. And we cannot allow it to get to one situation where one group is suppressed because it's the popular these days, because you never know when it's going to be you and your issue that is suppressed the next day. We have to keep it open for everybody. That's been a hallmark of America. And look, it's not just about the Palestinians, and we're going to talk about some other examples here in a minute. But this whole issue, this whole war has spawned a lot of things because there has been significant hatred of a lot of different groups that's going on in the Middle East, and some of our policies are contributing to that. And part of the fallback is that when the White House talks, all this stuff about what's going on in Israel and whitewashes what Israel's doing in any of these things, and just points to Hamas or just points to Iran, making it look like Israel hasn't done anything, that's causing a lot of anger to people who see it for what it is, and they see that it's a mess and that there's a lot of blame to go around on nearly every side. And so one of the feedback there has been a rise in anti-Semitism, legitimate anti-Semitism, as this report shows.
Feel very deeply for all those people who are trying.
We are here to speak up about the anti-Semitism happening in El Camino.
Dozens of students at El Camino Real High School in Woodland Hills staged a walkout Tuesday.
Stop the hate! Stop the hate!
Protesting what they say is a rise in anti-Semitism in their classrooms.
I'm honestly scared to go to school.
Daniela Shed says last week a fellow 9th grader yelled anti-Semitic remarks and then physically assaulted her in class.
He called me a dirty Jew. And so then I said something out of defense. And he said he was going to beat me up, and I didn't believe him until he got up, pushed me, and started punching me repeatedly in the neck and the back.
And that's just one issue. That's just one that I grabbed. There's been a bunch of that. There's been a legitimate rise in anti-Semitism, and it needs to be stopped. It needs to be squashed. But we can't, in the name of squashing anti-Semitism, be blind to the fact that there is a reason for some of this. Our policies are contributing to the anti-Semitism. Here's what you can't do. You can't say, we're going to continue to make these dumb statements that eliminate any issues that are going on that the Israeli side are doing, legitimately truth on the ground, and make it sound like only the other people are all bad, because what you're doing is you're giving basically a free hand to the Israelis to do things that violate international law, that violate American law. And there's a lot of things going on. We've talked about that many times in the way that the Israelis are conducting this operation in the Gaza Strip. Violates American law in so many different ways, violates international law, like their attack on the embassy in Damascus, like their, the destruction of the way of life in the Gaza Strip, the fact that so many tens of thousands of people are being killed. All of those things violate law. To ignore that entirely makes people mad especially if they view things either balanced or they view things toward the Arab view, because they're saying that's not fair what you're doing, and you're giving a free hand to more of the people get killed here. So it's enabling people and feeding the hatred that people have for Israel. We don't need that. I'm a big fan of Israel, have been for all my life. Actually, I think I've mentioned before, I had a trip that was planned to Israel next month. We would have been going there for the first time, my wife and I, and now we don't get to go because of all this stuff here. So we have no problem with Israel at all. But I do have a lot of problem with some of the Israeli government policies. And I definitely have an issue with American policies and actions that are contributing to this. All this stuff harms us, folks. It's not innocent. And it's not just wordsmithing here, to try to get your way. There's consequences to it. And now it's having an impact here in our country. Now, there's another issue that's in the news lately. Asna Tabassum, the valedictorian at the USC, was supposed to give the commencement address. But now then, because of a lot of the things that she said supporting the Palestinian people, now that all of a sudden the university has declared, taken away her right to speak out of some flimsy claim that, oh, it's for security issues. Well, that's obviously not washing with people because they see right through that. And here's one student at USC who gave his view.
This week, the school announced because of security concerns, they're canceling her speech on graduation day.
Security reasons are definitely, it seems kind of like just like a made-up reason. We had Barack Obama here last year, and if we can protect a former president, especially one that, you know, half the country probably doesn't really like him, then I think that we can definitely protect a student.
But now here's the issue. There's two sides to this story too. So a lot of the reason why a lot of people were up in arms about her speaking is because she had posted some things on her Instagram that said something to the effect of she believes in the abolition of the Israeli state. That's going to make a lot of people in this country upset, certainly a lot of people in Israel and their supporters at USC. She went on, Asna went on CNN, and to their credit, CNN asked the hard question.
The reason I'm asking is because that's what the link said. It called for the complete abolishment of Israel. Abolishment of Israel was in the actual language. Is that something that you endorse?
So the abolishment of the state of Israel, I'd like to clarify, is the abolishment of an apartheid system. It inherently is a system that subjugates Palestinians as dehumanized, and it subjugates Palestinian life as not worth the same as other human life. So when the link says...
So is that a yes then?
I think a yes or a no would be an injustice to the issue, and I think that any sort of ideological debate or any sort of academic discourse is worth clarification and worth discussion.
Now, look, a lot of people aren't going to accept that answer there. They're going to say, wait, are you advocating the abolition of Israel or not? And you see, she's not going to answer that. I actually read some of the things that she had written, and the vast majority is that she, like she did say there, she's looking for equality and the taking care of the Palestinian people. And she wants them to not be treated like cattle and killed without remorse or without concern, the civilian population and the way that it's being treated in there. And so that's a valid issue. It's also valid for people to disagree with her and to say, hey, we don't like your views here. But here's the point. We get back again, circle to the free speech issue. Do we want to say that, yes, people can only speak freely if they say what we want them to, if they say the things that are politically correct, if they say the things that are popular today, and then we're going to shut up everybody else? Because I'm telling you, if we continue down that path, we'll not start because we're already on it. If we continue down that path to where we silence anybody who says something that a majority doesn't like, you can see that public opinion is a very fickle thing, and it changes a lot in nearly any topic. And if we keep shutting up people who say things that that some segments don't like, then you're going to find out that it's not going to be about freedom of speech anymore. It's going to be about power. Who's got the power? Because you're going to be denied free speech if you say something that it turns out some number of people don't agree with. And we're seeing that in, lots of areas in our country already where it is going on. I mean, the abortion issue is a big one. The LGBTQ issue is another really emotional issue that has strong adherents and opponents on both sides, and they want to shut the other side up. But if we're going to be a country that truly is free, that truly is a democracy, we're going to have to dial that back. And if you have something to say, if you like abortion, if you like LGBTQ, if you like Israel, if you don't like the Palestinians or Hamas or whatever, you've got to be free to give your viewpoint. And if you think the other side's wrong, have a better argument. Go on your social media, have a protest, whatever you want to do. You have that right to do that. We have to have the freedom of speech. And then people in the rest of the world and the rest of the country can make up their own minds on that. We dare not keep going down this path here, because when we do things like this, it causes the anger side to rise. And when a group feels like it's being shut down and it's being denied the right to speak, they get more angry. And what do you think angry people do when they get angry enough? They start taking other actions. And now then you have the possibility of this thing escalating into different kinds of violence. We've been through periods like that in our country in the past. We don't want to go back there again. And one of the last things I'm going to show you here is because I talked about how, some of our foreign policy, some of the hatred that we have overseas and the double standards that we have overseas are having this blowback, which you're seeing on those issues I've just shown you here. Here's an example from earlier today. This is a great example of what we're doing and how it's so negative from Secretary of State Blinken. He was talking today, I believe at the G7 meeting, about what Israel had just done to Iran and some of the actions that they took. Listen carefully to what he says here, and I'm going to point out what he didn't say.
First, the G7 condemned the unprecedented Iranian attack on Israel. Unprecedented in scope and scale. Scope because it was a direct attack on Israel from Iran. Scale because it involved more than 300 munitions, including ballistic missiles. We're committed to Israel's security. We're also committed to de-escalating, to trying to bring this tension to a close. You saw as well, or you'll see soon in the G7 statement, a commitment to hold Iran to account for its destabilizing activities, holding it to account by degrading its missile and drone capabilities. And yesterday, the United States announced additional sanctions on Iran.
So obviously, the United States is for Israel. It's self-evidently so. But when you have the Secretary of State saying things like this and leading the G7, that we condemn Iran for what they did, for that 350 missile barrage, and their destabilizing events, and we're going to sanction them. But we want to de-escalate, so we don't want it to get out of hand, but we want to be able to squash Iran and want them to do nothing about it. I mean, obviously that's contradictory, and it's not going to happen because the actions are at cross purposes. But what's also important is what he didn't say. And what he didn't say anything about was when on April 1st, what preceded the unprecedented Iranian action, and it was unprecedented, they'd never attacked Israel from Iranian territory, is that Israel had an unprecedented attack and broke all diplomatic norms through centuries and destroyed a diplomatic compound in Syria of the Iranians. And that didn't get a peep. There was no condemnation of Israel for that. There wasn't even a mention of it. And said, I've lost count of the times. I think we put up earlier this week, Steve Scalise saying this unprovoked Iranian attack of when they launched these 350 rounds and drones. Well, of course it was provoked. Absolutely it was provoked. It was not out of nowhere. It was for a very specific reason. And if we want to de-escalate the situation, you got to identify everybody who's doing stuff that's nonsense, that helps to create the conditions. It looks like we dodged a bullet here and we're not going to have a regional war because at the last minute from whatever it was going on, I'm sure we'll find out later that there was lots of diplomatic activity behind the scenes that caused Iran to take a measured approach, fired something that was going to be easy for the Iron Dome to knock down. And now it looks like overnight Israel did the same thing and fired just 3 drones, which they have a lot more capability than that, to an area where they knew they would be easily shot down. So it looks like we've dodged a bullet for the moment here. But then you see Secretary Blinken exacerbating the problem and doing the same things he's done in the past, where we don't say anything about what the Israeli side did and everything on the Iranian side. Look, a lot of people in the world are neutral on this, but when they see the U.S. have this gross double standard where they allow the gross violation of international law by our ally and then cast all the blame on the other side, then that degrades people's trust in us. And even people at home, when they see that all you do is say good things about one side and ignore the things that they do that are wrong, and then highlight or say worse about the other side. I've seen overnight, I was on a lot of television shows, radio shows after the Iranian response, and I heard lots of people, and it just turned to my stomach, some of these commentators saying that basically the Palestinian people don't have a leg to stand on. There are no innocent civilians in some of their views because they hear this stuff all the time about how bad the Hamas is and the equation, like Senator Cotton did, of Hamas and Palestinian people, like they're all terrorists. And so a lot of people in the United States don't even think they deserve to live. They think they deserve everything they get. These 34,000 people that have been killed, Hey, they shouldn't have voted for Hamas. This dehumanizing things, and then that bleeds over into behavior on the street because the Palestinians or those who support them hate that, and they think it's grossly unfair, and so they protest, and then they get into anti-Semitism, and then it bleeds into there, and then vice versa. You see, this continues to build on itself. Folks, we've got to do something different here. We got to nip this in the bud right now before it continues to escalate and gets into an area where it could be violence in our country. And it's so hard to control once it gets to that point. It's bad enough, but this is some of the consequences of not being honest, of not telling the truth of what's really going on, and holding ourselves and our allies accountable to a standard that we want to hold everybody else in the world to. Having double standards is a big deal because it harms our own interest, aside from just being morally right. And that is your deep dive today. We're going to come back for you. We have the Intel brief coming up this afternoon at, I believe it's 3:30 is what we're going to have on there. But watch for that to pop up there. We're going to have Mike Domino, former CIA officer, is going to help us with this. Going to have some really good insights for you. We will see you soon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.